Greetings, everyone. Welcome. Good to see you, Tanya, Mary, Stephanie, Jessica. We're giving everyone a little bit of time to sign in. Welcome, Christy. And I just want to let everyone know that the session is being recorded. Your cameras are off, but you'll have the opportunity to unmute yourself and respond and or chat in the chat box. Hi, Sasha. Greetings, Michelle and Cindy. Hi, Sharon.
Hello.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Just give everyone a moment to sign on. Again, a reminder that the session is being recorded. Hi, everyone. My name is Terrell Thomas, and I will be the moderator today. So I will start with some public service announcements and then pass it over to our fabulous panelists here. Thank you all for joining this session. Hope you all are enjoying the conference. Again, note that during the session, your videos are off, but you'll have an opportunity to respond in the chat. Feel free to share hearts, thumbs up, emojis, smiles to engage with the panelists. In regards to our PSA, this training is offered through the Crisis and Recovery Enhancement Care TA Center, which is funded by the California Department of Healthcare Services, DHCS, and administered by the Center for Applied Research Solutions. The views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect the views, opinion, or policies of the California Department of Healthcare Services. In the case of any security issues that may occur, the session will immediately end and will not resume. A separate email will be sent to all participants with further instructions. Thank you. I would like to remind everyone that the session is being recorded. Your microphones are off, but you're welcome to use the chat to ask any questions for the panelists. We will hold all questions to the end so the panelists to have opportunity to present, and then towards the end of the session, we'll have about 15-20 minutes for Q&A. Please use I statements in the chat and avoid making comments that are stigmatizing or otherwise injurious toward others. Your message will be received by the chat box monitor, who will filter all comments as able. The chat box monitor will not share comments to the audience that are harmful. We will use polling features to invite group participation. If you experience any tech challenges, we have a tech host that is available. Please follow all of our community agreements and in regards to being respectful of others and open and engaging in this session. I just want to let everyone know that the slides will be available on the CVent platform. Now it's time to begin the panel presentation. Again, at the end of the presentation, we'll have an opportunity for audience Q&A. And I invite everyone to provide their feedback to the survey that is available on the CVent platform. At this time, I'm pleased to invite the panelists, Dr. Virgil Moorhead, Amada, Charlie, Shay, Wakara, to introduce themselves.
So thank you for having us. How we thought we would like to do is get right into our talk, and then each, we have all of us from Two Feathers here. And so I'll give a sort of general overview and then turn it over to Shay and Wakera next. And then they'll introduce themselves a little bit. And then Charlie and Amada will go. So I'm going to share my screen. Can you all see that? All right. So a little bit about us is we're up in Humboldt County, up in the Yurok, Tolowa, Wiyot, Karuk, and others in what some say the heart of Indian country in California, in the sense of the most native folks in a location in the state, the most concentrated natives in the state in this area. Two Feathers Native American Family Services has been existence for about close to 20 years. But we've really pivoted the last like 4 years to really focus on youth and serving all natives in the county. But really, there was a great talk yesterday in this conference. And one of the things the keynote speaker was talking about is culturally targeting your target population. And I think that's what we're going to be talking about today in regards to crisis services and working with Native American youth and families. And so I think, my task on this panel is just to give a sort of general broad overview of Native American mental health and what we're doing at Two Feathers. And so if you could see this slide, I think this, really captures Native mental health, including crisis services, Native youth serving agencies. On one hand, we got urgent community needs, right? Due in large part to the genocide that occurred in this state, the historical trauma, some would call it, the settler colonialism, others would call it, but urgent community needs and incongruent clinical services. For far too often, the services haven't met the people that need it, right? And so that's, where we're at, I think, with Native mental health, behavioral health, or whatever you want to call it. And that's what we've been trying to tackle, this puzzle right here at Two Feathers over the last 3 or 4 years. There's multiple approaches to tackling that. You could start with conventional treatment and adapt it, which we do some of that. We do a lot of talk therapy, and we try to get those kids and youth that are in talk therapy or group therapy into our cultural services. Or you can do a sort of bottom up, start with Indigenous values, Indigenous traditions, Indigenous native teachings, and build it up from there. And some of our panelists today will be talking about that. But I think we do a combination of both. And I think if you go throughout Native American communities throughout the nation, you'll find the inverted or the beyond usual approach. And so with that, I think that it's important to say that, and it's important to name that a Native American organization, a small Native American organization, Native-led, largely Native-employed organization can be successful. And I think we've been fairly successful. Although we have a lot of work to do and continued improvement like everybody else, we have been successful, I think. And I think it's important to state that because, from 2018, we were serving, 45 youth to over 300 in 2019. A staff from 4 to 29. We've expanded our services throughout the area to the most remote parts of the county. And some of our panelists are from that area. And, I think right now we have close to 150 youth in traditional mental health counseling during COVID. So I think that we're moving in the right direction, and really we've created access and opportunity. And so if there's crisis service, culturally sensitive crisis service, you got to think access and opportunity. And what we're going to talk about today, the other panelists, is how do we make that happen, right? And so, before I turn it over to Shay, I'll briefly say like, all right, well, wow, that's a lot of progress. That's a lot of growth. Well, what is our approach? What are we trying to do? What have we been doing? And I think that, we have to say that it's holistic. So whether it's Charlie, Wakera, or Shay, what they're going to talk about, it's a holistic approach to wellness. It's not just this sort of biological, genetic, sort of biomedical model. That doesn't work in Indian country. Now it's not an either or. It has value, but we have to consider holistic, and that includes not just the person. That includes the land. That includes the spiritual world, right? That's the holistic approach. And so, a deep recognition of the determinants of wellness being people, the land and environment, and access to having resources. So in our approach, we're tackling that, or at least we're trying our best to be open-minded to creating opportunities for our kids and children. And, it's tied to place. I know Charlie will speak a little bit about this, and others will too. But, in this time, in this era, and also as Indigenous people since the first day, land has been important, right? That is tied to mental health and crisis services. And so, I think a little more specifics before I turn it over to the next panelist is one of the things we do at Two Feathers in regards to crisis services and just work with Native youth is trying to hold them responsible without blaming them, without categorizing, without diagnosing, really having this idea of unconditional care. Like we have kids sitting in, juvenile hall that the community is thrown out. Some parts of the community, not the whole community, but we're trying to reach those kids, right? And so, I think that, and how do we reach those kids? Well, for one, we're teaching them to be less dependent and independent, actually, and more interdependent. That's an important point because mainstream psychology, mainstream mental health will teach them to be more independent, more individualistic, more self-focused, often, not always, but we're trying to teach more interdependent. Enculturation, which our panelists will be talking about today, the idea of learning your history. And really this idea from going from an egocentric I to a sociocentric self, which means I'm connected to my ancestors, I'm connected to the people next to me, and I'm connected to the land, right? And, giving an example, in some Indigenous communities, how you conceive, how you construct the self is through the heart. It's through the heart, it's not through the mind. So if there's disease, if there's struggles, you look to the heart, not the mind. So that would throw out cognitive behavioral therapy that looks at thoughts and emotions, and it would look at the heart. That's a whole different way of thinking about mental health. But that would be one way to think about it if you're really taking into consideration Indigenous ways of being. And so what we're trying to do is enculturation of learning those things from our local traditions and teaching it with the kids. And that helps us, provide, I think, good services. Inclusion of, lived experience is another thing that we're doing and we want to do. And, if we talk about suicide prevention, I think it's switching from suicide prevention to life promotion, this more assets-based, strength-based, that in Indigenous traditions, we honor life, we honor our ancestors, we honor our land, we come from pride, we come from cultures of respect. And so, switching that language is another example, I think, that, we increasingly are going to want to go towards. The special ingredients, cultural camps, which Charlie and others will be talking about, and just what it takes to connect in a good way. Different kind of language, right? And so to sum all this up, since, I've only got a little bit of time, is, I think our model, and when we're going to get into specifics again with our other panelists, is, really sort of a grassroots movement, really connecting everything to culture. We hammer away day in and day out. It's all about engagement and trust. And then you get to the mental health. Then you get to the crisis services. Then the kids will call you if they're in crisis. You don't have any services if you don't have engagement, trust, and they know that you represent culture in a good way. Now it's an ongoing process, but that's what we're trying to do. And you got to think long term. And so, you know, language and approach, like, you know, this is what we, in this quote, this is what we come from, and this is what we're trying to lay out. And as you hear the other speakers on the panel, that's what they're going to be talking about specifically. And so I'm going to turn it over to Shay, who oversees a lot of our promotion and prevention programming that has a lot of the bottom up programming that comes from our local traditions. And everyone here on the panel are local natives of this area that have lived experience. And so, Shay, if you can introduce yourself and say maybe a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Virgil, and thank you everybody for coming. Can you guys hear me? I'm in my headphones.
Okay,
I'm seeing nods. Perfect, thank you. So like Virgil said, my name is Shay. I am the Youth Prevention and Promotion Program Director for Two Feathers Native American Family Services. I am Yura, Kupa, and Wailaki person. So again, a Native person from this area, and I've been with Two Feathers for about 2.5, almost 3 years now. After receiving my master's in social work degree from Humboldt State University. So that's just a little bit about me. I've been tasked, a little disclaimer, I am outside because I'm working from home with a 1-year-old. So you may hear him in the background playing outside, trying to keep him entertained during this hour. So I apologize in advance if you can hear him or see him in background. So I wanted to first kind of talk a little bit more and get into depth of some of our youth prevention programming at Two Feathers. The first one that kind of started us out, aside from the programming Virgil talked about earlier, is our intensive mentorship program. We currently have 4 staff members working under this program who provide weekly one-on-one mentorship to youth in our area. We have about 60 youth enrolled. So between the 4 of my team members, the 60 folks are distributed out based off of, you know, interests, gender. Some folks even like hear in the grapevine, like, oh, I heard Charlie, you know, is doing such great work and I want my son to work with him. And so oftentimes we'll get a lot of referrals from the community just based off the good work we're already doing. We also have our probation diversion program, which is stemmed from the intensive mentorship program that Charlie primarily oversees, and he'll talk more about that. And so I'm not going to get too into that piece so that Charlie can explain a little more. And then we also oversee the events and cultural programming that come out of Two Feathers. So we do things such as weaving circles with women. We do Yurok language weekly classes. We do our Acorn Youth Wellness Program, which is a yearly day camp that happens in the summertime. We do, there's just so much. Bike Wednesday Bike Club, which is a relatively new group, and something that we've been really working on doing is kind of implementing year-long annual programming started like this summer. So we are really in the mix of developing and implementing a lot of new programming for our tribal youth. One thing that I wanted to expand on from what Virgil said earlier is the bottom-up approach. So oftentimes you'll see our Native youth who are super against doing, you know, traditional therapy, clinical work with clinical peoples, which we have a whole huge clinical program also. And so I often give shout outs to my team for being those people that are the first that our kids get to see, the first group of people that our kids get to interact with. And oftentimes they're the reason that our kids are in therapy or seeing a clinical person on our team. And we often say, like, our advocates and our mentors are doing clinical practice even without that degree. And so just really highlighting their efforts and their personal experience that makes that possible and makes it a positive experience and makes it work. And so I did kind of put together this to kind of highlight our programs. And then the next step would be to kind of share a youth story. And so Virgil will share a video that one of our youth did as a part of our Healing Journey program. which is ongoing still. Just a disclaimer though, it is heart-wrenching and it may be triggering. So if you need time just to step back and take a breath as you're listening to this youth story, feel free to do so. What I really want to highlight as you're listening and watching it though is her processes and her steps. So we've been working with this young lady for a little over 2 years now. And the progress that she has made because of the team that we've built around her has been amazing to watch. And so that's going to be what Wakera will talk about next. But I'm going to ask Virgil to play the video, and then we will reflect together, Wakera and I, about the video and just watching this youth grow in that way. And for some reason, my head keeps getting cut off in my video, so I apologize about that. So Virgil, if you can please play the video.
Can you hear it?
Now, Keishan Daniels. I am 14 years old and I come from both the Trinidad Rancheria and Yurok tribe. I was born and raised in Humboldt County my whole life. My experience with substance abuse, I personally have not struggled with addiction, but I have definitely dealt with addiction in ways that are hurtful. I've struggled with it with my mother, with my father, with a lot of people in my family. You don't need to struggle from abuse personally to be affected by it, pretty much. Because of my mom's struggle with addiction, we were removed from her care. I was separated from my brother and sister. I've moved from family to family's houses while my mom continued to fight addiction. Because of addiction, my dad, he's been absent pretty much my whole life. Like, he comes and he goes, obviously, like a lot of addicts do. My mom, she fought and she tried, but addiction isn't something that's easy to overcome. And I wish I could have understood that more, because I was just left with the constant thought of like, why are me and my brother and sister not good enough? Like, why does she always just have to go back to it? But now I realize that it's a lot more than that, a lot more than that. And it's not easy. And I mean, it puts a lot of people through pain. Unfortunately, on August 30th, my mom lost her battle to addiction. She passed away, which is also a day before my birthday, so causing me to find out on August 31st, my 14th birthday, that my mother is gone. And my advice to people out there struggling with addiction that have children is remember that you're not only hurting yourself, you're hurting a lot of other people with your addiction. You're not only bringing yourself down, you're bringing everyone down with you. Your choices you make, even if it's the smallest thing, you always got to think about your kids. Like, you brought them into this world. It's your job to take care of them. And if you're struggling with addiction, you can't be your best at that. You can't do your best job. People in active addiction often make risky, poor choices that don't only affect them, but a lot of other people. And my mom had made one of those choices, and now she's no longer with us. What helps me get through everything right now is just remembering that times weren't always bad. There's a lot of good memories with my mom, especially summer 2019. The brush dances, the river trips, the car rides, the singing, just like everything, the camping. So I definitely need to focus more on that sometimes. My hope for myself is to break the cycle of addiction that my family has been in for quite some time. If there is one thing that I would want any kid to know that has parents or anyone, a loved one that is struggling with addiction, is remember that it is not your fault.
Thank you, Virgil. And so, like I said, I just really wanted to share that story as a way for us to kind of reflect on some of the things that our Native youth are going. Uriah, please stop. Are going through, and then also kind of highlight, like, our team has been with this young lady since before this tragedy has happened. During the tragedy, as she was processing that tragedy, and where she's at now. And so just kind of bringing it back to, like, the power of love our Two Feathers family has for our kids. And it shows every single day that we're working with our kids, and it shows every single day that we're out in our communities. Like, we still, we have our Two Feathers values that all of our staff live by each day. And just to really highlight the importance of that, right? Like, we are from this community and we're here to give back to the community. And so I wanted to turn this over to my colleague, Wakera Scott, who is going to kind of talk about that story a little more. Wakera is linked up with Kishan and has a pretty positive relationship with her, and again has been with her from from day to day, step to step. So Wakera, if you want to introduce yourself and kind of go into more detail of that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Shay. Aikui Nekna Wakera Scott, Watek, Sume, Wakera, Wametchuk. Hi, my name is Wakera Scott. I come from the villages of Sume, Wakera, and Watek. I am an enrolled Yurok tribal member, and I'm also Karuk, Kalawa, and Siletz. I am a case manager and youth advocate at Two Feathers, and I have been a part of the Two Feathers team for about 2 years now. So like Shay was saying, the youth in the video is my mentee. I've been working with her for about 3 years now, I believe. So even before I started working at Two Feathers, I knew her from, because I've been working in the community with Native youth since I was 15. So I've known Kishan previously. And I've been with her through the loss of her mom, and also transitioning into high school. I grew up in the foster care system. I grew up a foster youth. And so I have similar lived experiences as Kishan. I lost my bio mom to a hit and run while she was battling severe alcoholism and substance abuse. So I think having similar experiences as her helped me understand what she's going through and help her process that, because I had also lived through that experience of losing a mom at a young age, because I was a sophomore when that happened. I was a sophomore when that happened. So I think it really motivates me to support our youth, having been through the foster system and have had a lot of experiences that I've moved past, and just trying to grow into a better person and be the change, switch up the cycle. And I think what we do here with our youth is we're a positive role model that that can be there, consistency, and help them move on and reach their goals.
Thank you. And so, I think, there's what Kara and Shay had mentioned, but I just wanted to emphasize that oftentimes, it's deeper. If we think about crisis care, we think about working in the communities that we're coming from. It's about relationships and trust and respect. And so in these tragedies that the video showed, and what Kara's talking about with this particular loose mom, Wakera and Shay were often the first people that the youth reach out to, and do reach out to if they're in ongoing crisis. Because, we aren't going to show a video like we just did or do a project unless we're committed to working with this youth. And so this particular youth now is employed with us. And so there's more mentorship going on because, that's what you do what it needs to be done to help with kids like this. And I think, again, hopefully you get out of this talk hope that it's possible. So I'm going to turn it over to our next panelist and bring up the slideshow. But Charlie?
Yes, thank you everyone, and thank you Walkera and Shay for expressing such great vulnerability in this space. And I think it really goes hand in hand with the work that we do and why we do the work that we do. So I just wanted to recognize that. So yeah, my name is Charlie Reed. I'm a Hoopa Yurok person up here in Northern California. I recently finished my bachelor's degree at Humboldt State University, and with that, I got a connection with a lot of network. I had a lot of networking, and I think that was the most impactful part of my college experience. And with that, I ended up kind of interning here at Two Feathers as a mentor, kind of an event-to-event basis. And I really kind of found my calling, something that I've always itched to want to do is give back to my community. I always knew I had a niche for working with kids and working hands-on with culture and community. And for some reason, I never pursued that on my own. And it wasn't until working at Two Feathers, I kind of come into that responsibility. And since then, I've just been super invested and passionate about this work because I knew growing up, I had two parents and still do, and they provided me the structure and stability that I know a lot of people in our community don't have the privilege of saying or having. And so with that, I knew that I had something to offer kids and families who might not have that dynamic, because even though I didn't have them personally, I knew that really close members of my family had, those type of dynamics of no parents or abuse, violence in their household. And so for me, that hurt my heart as a young kid, and it influenced me in a positive way. And I know that that's a really luck of the draw, because sometimes that pushes you into the negative way. And so with that, I think that's one of my greatest skill sets within this work. Recently kind of come into the position of Division of Juvenile Justice, and where I'm working more with kids ages 7 to 18, which is a pretty vast age group, who may or may not be in the juvenile system, or who are at the rate of being in that system. And so what that really means is what they call quote unquote at risk families or children. I like to think of it more positive based, like Virgil was saying earlier, more at promise, because I think they have a lot of potential in some of the systems such as education, school, juvenile services don't always get to bring the best out of them. And so for that, like, that's like one of the biggest barriers for me, is just getting a hold of them. And so it takes a lot of consistency. It takes a lot of time and energy to make sure that I'm getting a response back, even if it's over text messaging, and scheduling or trying to schedule seeing them and meeting up with them. And when I do, it's usually like, when are you coming back? Like, why, like, when are you coming back? Or our time's already over. And it's really hard for me to leave some of these kids, because I know it's just one day of the week usually. And so for me, like, these kids are really important to me and our community and our culture, because our the sustainability and the future of our culture and people are in the hands of our youth. And if they're in a place where they can't access some of those connections because of the day-to-day grind, then we're in serious risk of losing what keeps us sustained through time. So it's really important for me. It's more than just a career. Like, I see a lot of myself in these kids. And so I think that with me having a degree and still pursuing my master's degree, I have some type of skills or some type of positive influence on some of these kids to see themselves like, wow, it is possible for myself as a Native young man to be successful. usually it could be painted as if they're not going to be in successful positions or just in addictive positions or any type of stigmas around being what it means to be a Native man. And so some of the work that I try to do is obviously being that consistent male role model, but I also like to try and orchestrate some life skill development. And just with some of the kids that I've worked with, some of the themes that I've noticed that is a need or a desire is having money or having access or freedom, having a working permit so that way they can make an honest living, I think is one of the most consistent parts of what makes someone successful. And then, like I was saying, the freedom part is like driver's license. So the kids who are of age, like 15, 16, start thinking about how can I not depend on my parents for anything. And transportation is like a big deal up here because it's such a rural place where there's not a lot to do, and sometimes you have to depend on a ride from your parents or your caregiver to get to a friend's house. And so driver's license are a big deal up here for sure. And so those are some of the things that I work on with some of my more like older age kids. And then professional development, so I'll get them into different kind of job work trainings or just get them into some local resources that will give them that structure and that guidance to be successful in this modern world. Because as much as I'd love to get back to like our traditional way of living where you could live off the land and you could really you can persevere through a lot of different um, different type of barriers. Like the reality of our situation is that we have to start interweaving modern practices with our traditional practices, and then have the end goal being something of a hybrid or a well balanced kind of relationship with the Western world and then our traditional practices. And so one thing that I think that Two Feathers does a terrific job at doing is really highlighting and supporting the significance and the role of culture into healing. And like Virgil and others had said, we have talk therapy, we have that Western medicine approach, but we hold connection to culture and community and place just as prominently, just because we understand that that has a lot to do with some of the behaviors that may be problematic in this Western system. And so, what I like to do and what the grant that funds my position supports me in doing is getting that kind of cultural connection. They offer us some money to pay maybe a local practitioner to teach them a skill. And so with that, it's being understanding that a connection to cultural activity or connection to community who might be teaching that course and a connection to the place that they might be at really is a great opportunity for them to think long term about their healing rather than an hour session, like where you're going to get a lot of relief, immediate kind of relief. So if you have that two-prong approach, you're going to get that immediate relief and that sense of connection and belonging in the community, in your culture, and in your place. And so that's something that it scratches the itch for me personally, because I grew up in the middle of the heart of Kaduk country, and I had a really iffy kind of relationship with my culture just because of kind of the family politics that continue to exist. It impacted me to where like I kind of had a hit or miss kind of relationship. And so I lost out on a lot of opportunity to learn from some elders who are no longer with us. And so for me, I want to make sure that people understand that it's really important that kids have opportunities and access that they may not have otherwise. And Two Feathers can be that vehicle that drives them literally to places to make sure that they have that connection, that sense of belonging, and sense of purpose. And so just this last weekend, I have a couple of pictures that we can click on right here. We brought up four. Can you go back one? All right, that's fine. So we had four young men who committed to going on a camping trip to help some of my fellow community members work on some sacred site cleaning, sacred trail cleanup. And it was raining, the first night I was a little hesitant because it was raining, and raining and camping usually doesn't go together. But my colleague and I decided it's kind of like a now or never situation, and we went through with it. And truth be told, there wasn't one complaint from the kids. They were just like excited to get outside, get out of the house. And a lot of these kids didn't really know each other. And two of them were related. And we gave them the opportunity to meet a fellow cousin of theirs that they probably wouldn't have otherwise. And one of the kids has never been out of Humboldt County. Another one has family up there who he hadn't had an opportunity to kind of get connection with, or the place or the culture. And so what this project offered was a connection to community, culture, and place. And I think that's exactly why these kids didn't express 1 ounce of frustration or anything like that. And a lot of times, from what I've been hearing, these are the kids who are labeled as the problematic kids in the classrooms or in school. And I couldn't see that, just because of how responsive they were to the things that we're doing. Some of these kids, if not all of these kids, didn't have any job training in like weed eating or cleaning up any, like brushing anything. And so we made sure we had like safety protocols. We made sure we had all those things in place to set them up for success. And they really helped the community, because it's been a long time coming for this type of work to happen, because it's been overgrown. There's just hasn't been a lot of time um, to do a lot of this work that has to be done, just because of everyone's working or everyone has a different priority at the time. And so for us, we met a big community need around our world renewal ceremonies. And and with the work, it really, like having fun swimming in the rain, like that was something, like they're expressing joy and they had just a great time. And working hard is like that perfect balance that we're all trying to thrive for. And then having that connection to community, like you can see in this top picture, the gentleman in the white shirt, that's my dad, and he's a ceremonial leader, and he's teaching these kids like the significance of the work that they're doing and how they're working to work. They're working on their medicine. Good medicine is like the integrity, it's the values that you don't always see. And even if you don't think anyone's watching, like there's somebody above who's watching you do the right thing. And that's what's going to generate good luck for you for now and forever, just as long as you have a good heart with what you do. And so those are some of the principles that we're being taught as we're working really hard and having fun too. Like these kids were basically strangers at the beginning of the trip, and by the end of the trip, they all rode back with me in our van because they just didn't want to leave each other at the moment. And so that's, for me, what I think is going to be an effective change, everlasting impact on the kids that we serve, is giving them these opportunities and accesses that they might not ever have. And so I think that's what Two Feathers is a great bridge for, is giving people who might not have access or opportunity that chance. So thank you for listening, and I think I'll pass it over to Amada and some of the amazing work that she has been doing.
Awesome. Thank you for all the work you're doing, Charlie. I haven't been able to see some of the new projects you're doing, so that was kind of a refresher for me. And yeah, I also have a slide on the slideshow, but I want to go ahead and give a little introduction about myself just briefly. My name is Amada. I'm a Karuk and Shasta native here in Humboldt County, relatively kind of near where Two Feathers is. I've grown up here all my life. I have a little bit of an interesting connection with Two Feathers, though. I was a youth in particular that was able to receive Two Feathers services in the early 2000s while I was going through middle and high school. And I've been able to see the growth that the agency has had over the years. And lately I've been able to be a part of that, and kind of, as Virgil was talking about, growing from 4 to 29 staff members. I know some of the OG members of the staff from when I was there, and they're still there. So it's kind of heartwarming still to be there and giving back in the community, kind of in a cultural way. I, in particularly, wasn't necessarily raised in a ceremony or dance family, a family that gave me that right away a culture. I have a lot of personal experience as well with a lot of the youth that I mentor, and I'm a youth advocate here at Two Feathers, similarly to all of our panelists here. And I in particularly work a lot with youth who, most of my youth that have a lot of crisis response. And that's a lot where I've been drawn lately. And that, I have realized, can have its really tough and pulling moments, but it also can be relatively rewarding and wholeheartedly just great to see where these kids can end up with the response that we can give. And I think one of the cases that I will talk about is working with the Native communities here. And there was a Bear River crisis here in our local communities. It was broadcasted over kind of the news. It was relatively well known here in the community what was going on, and that we are working with this family and being able to go and respond in a situation where there's a lot of emotion, a lot of people being pulled in different ways. I personally have never been in a situation like that, but it gives me a lot of insight to what families deal with in these situations, and in particularly these kids. And that really opened up my eyes to want to be more of that, do that work in my advocacy. And kind of in particularly tying into the cultural programming part, I have seen the way that culture can be rewarding to kids, but what Charlie talked about is getting the kids involved and taking that first step can be really challenging for these youth. Some of them have never been involved, some have, some just, that's not what they're about right now. They have other challenging times and they just don't want that. They want a person to be there. And so we have to navigate all around that. But I have seen through being able to provide the cultural response programming and take them to events, or maybe, hey, I'm going to this or doing that, it does have an outcome of, in the sense of being able to connect them to maybe cousins, of what Charlie was saying, other programming within Two Feathers that they may benefit from, and relatively seeing other Native people that they are going through other experience as well, because that's like one of the main reasons that I'm still at Two Feathers. I've been seeing the response of what I've gone through, and people can keep going and provide an outlook for these kids and pretty much be a mentor that I would have wanted when I was younger and at Two Feathers. And now that I have that opportunity to be able to step into that shoe, I feel that it's a big responsibility to carry. And I think we can all say that we've been pulled in all different directions, but at the end of the day, it's nice when that kid does call you when they need that care, when they're being that person that reaches out to you, you know, okay, I've made that kind of nudge in their life. But kind of going back to the Bear River crisis, I was able to respond, bring out some kiddos, some beading kits, and kind of just bring their minds around to something that is going here. I'm making this is what I'm doing, putting power into something, your mind into something, being strong somewhere else. I think that has a lot of power within itself. And depending on what you're making, what power you're doing, I've learned you want to put good medicine into what you're making, good thoughts into that. You don't want to go and bring that negativity into what you might be wearing, what you might be giving someone, what me doing in ceremony. And so that right there, the youth was able to take that, work on that, and just change a direction. And just seeing that little response of being able to provide that hope in a crazy crisis response is what I want to be about and what I want to be for these kids. And through that, I've been able to actually get youth that I mentor now through that experience. I have kiddos that now I speak with weekly, check in on them, and have built a response just from being able to go and doing that. And now I've been able to actually establish, Shay talked about some of the awesome programming that we're doing at Two Feathers, and recently throughout the summer, adapting to COVID, and we already have areas that are not accessible here in Humboldt as easily, and especially our reservation and Native communities here. And through COVID, it put a lot on us in the sense of even being able to go out there safely and responding in that way. So one way I was able to adapt is starting a free bike club, and it actually started with just free bikes, bringing youth who maybe need a bike, doesn't have one, a bike. And now it's a full-fledged bike club at our Two Feathers, and we have a full-blown bike shed, and kids have been coming out every other week on the coast. We'll be bringing it out to Hoopa, but we've given over 25 youth throughout Hoopa, Humboldt County, basically here on the coast as well, bikes. And it's through community support, people donating, seeing posts that we make, local community organizations reaching out. And I think that too was almost in its own way a crisis response that I seen, because some of these kids that I am bringing these bikes have no other way. Some of them, Charlie had talked about not even leaving Humboldt County. A lot of the kids I work with hardly left their homes during COVID. They talked about going to the grocery store and from, but not even getting out of the car, not wanting to, not having a want to really do much. And it's a lot of it has just been, they are already secluded in these areas, but COVID kind of added to that. And so I just really was able to see firsthand the effects that just getting a bike and being able to go outside through the youth and the parents' perspectives, because a lot of the times the parents would text you, "This is awesome. They just rode over to their grandma's to show them their new ride," or something in the sense that would brighten my day, bring it back. But I think too, it's tying that cultural programming into that. And so we're bringing in Karuk language. I'll be bringing in where we're going to our native based areas, pretty much tying into how the, not necessarily Eureka, Fortuna, Arcata, tying into the native areas of these regions, the names that they're known by the local Karuk tribes, Karuk, Wiyot, Tolowa, Hupa, Yurok, just bringing all of that in and bringing in that known knowledge, because I think that is also not talked about. But I think in response to culturally responsive care and being there, the youth advocates are a really good example of being able to showcase what Two Feathers is all about and being there and being up front and foremost. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Virgil.
Thank you. So I thank you all the panelists. I see we have some time for questions. I'm gonna see if there's any questions from the people on here. Give it a little bit of time.
You can unmute or you can put it in the chat. I think are both options too.
So as the questions, if anybody, right, I'll talk and see if any questions come up. So I think tying it all together, and I'll look at the chat, or just raise your hand on the video on your Zoom. But tying all this together, I think, like Amada was talking about, like, if you don't have connection and relationships with the kids, you don't have programs. You don't have crisis services. Simple as that. And so all that we described today is not only preventative, but it is also interventions for crisis services. Because in order to have those kids or those families reach out to you or accept you in their house, it takes all the work that our team members, my team members, the panelists have been talking about. Like, it's not office-based work. It's not business as usual work. It's about building trust, building respect, and offering culturally responsive, targeted interventions to targeted populations. And so all of this, it's like you can't just do as a sort of add-on. It's not an add-on. Like, in order, I think that, if we want to give, data around crisis services, we have a suicide prevention, suicide promotion, or I mean, not promotion, but life promotion program. And it's at least 1 to 3 a week. I mean, not a week, a month. Once a month, we're in crisis with some kid. So we are reaching those kids. And the point again here is all of this that Charlie, Wakera, Shay, Amada talked about has to be part of a mental health program, right? Because again, if you don't have the trust with our community, if you don't have the respect, it's going to be hard to really have programs. And so the time is now for creativity, for innovation, for really locally based, youth-driven, culturally informed programming. And that's what we try to get across today for you all. And it's a work in progress too. because there's a lot of systemic barriers. There's a lot of this sort of status quo bias of naturally going to conventional services. But, I think that, again, one of our goals for this panel was to provide hope too, like it's a hard time right now with the pandemic and just a lot of struggles in our community and just at the statewide level. But, if we listen to the wisdom of the folks in the community, as well as be creative and really innovative, then I think things are going to be more possible. I'm wondering if anybody of our panelists had any last words, or I don't see any questions coming. Does anybody have any last words? Because I could keep talking.
I have no questions, but I just want to again thank you all for sharing. I'm so inspired by the work that you all are doing, and you can just feel the passion and commitment, and it's amazing. I love just the tie to the culture and supporting the youth from your lived experience. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing about the organization and the work that you are doing. And thank you all for everyone that was participating today in this panel discussion. Please go onto the CVent website and on the site and fill out the survey. This provides us the opportunity to get feedback and be able to bring more resources. So again, thank you all for attending the session, and hope that you all are getting a lot out of the conference. Bye, everyone.
Right.
Enjoy the